2019 years the building only had 2 floors. That was the first thing Emma should have remembered. She moved into number 14, Calder Street, on a wet Saturday in October. It wasn't much of a flat. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, bathroom with a shower that took 5 minutes to become warm, and another 10 minutes to decide whether it wanted to remain that way. But it was cheap, and after separating from Mark, cheap mattered. The building itself was Victorian, 4 flats downstairs, 4 upstairs, and above the 2nd floor, an attic. Nothing more. Emma knew that because the letting agent had shown her the floor plan. So when she heard footsteps above her bedroom, on her first night, she assumed they were coming from the attic. 3 slow steps. Pause. 3 more. Pause. Emma lay awake, listening. Step, step. Then silence. Old building, she thought. Pipes. Wood expanding. Mice, very large mice, wearing boots. She laughed at herself, rolled over and went to sleep. The following morning, she met her neighbor. His name was Alan. He lived across the landing and looked about 70. Settling in, he asked. Trying to. Emma smiled. Someone upstairs was having a wander about last night. Alan's expression changed. Only slightly. But Emma noticed. Upstairs, the attic. Alan stared at her. Then, he smiled. Old building. That was exactly what Emma had told herself. So she forgot about it. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then, Thursday morning, Emma found a letter on the mat. Not unusual, except it wasn't addressed to her. The envelope read, Miss Sarah else, Asia Flight 12 CHIRDF Floor 14 Keldia CSTR. To Emma turned the envelope over. No return address. The postmark was faded. She took it across to Alan. Do you know who Sarah Wells is? Alan looked at the envelope. The color left his face. Where did you get that? Through my door. Throw it away. Emma laughed. I'm not opening somebody else's post. I didn't say don't open it. Alan looked towards the stairs. I said throw it away. Then, he closed his door. That evening, Emma searched online. Nothing. No Sarah Wells, no 3rd floor. The building had 8 flats. Always had. At least according to the records she found. At 11:30, Emma went to bed. At 2:17, the footsteps returned. Step, 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 pause, step, step, step. Emma opened her eyes. This time, something was different. The footsteps weren't above her, they were on the stairs, coming down, step, step. Emma sat upright. The sound reached the landing, then stopped outside her flat. Silence. Emma waited. Someone slid something beneath her bedroom door, a piece of paper. Emma stared at it. She got out of bed and picked it up. It was the envelope, the one she'd thrown into the outside bin 6 hours earlier. Except now it was open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 words, Idabo Ang Fiat A7. Emma didn't sleep. The next morning, she confronted Alan. He let her inside. His flat smelled of cigarettes and furniture polish. Emma placed the letter on his table. Tell me. Alan stared at it for a long time. Then he sat down. Sarah Wells lived here. When? Before you were born. Emma waited. 1978. Alan rubbed his hands together. I was 17. My parents lived downstairs. There were 8 flats then, same as now. Emma frowned. Then why does this say 3rd floor? Alan looked at her. Because Sarah said she lived there. Emma stared. That's ridiculous. I know, Alan continued. She appeared one winter. Nobody knew where she'd come from. Young woman, early 20s. People saw her entering the building, walking upstairs. But nobody ever saw her come back down. Emma sat opposite him. Where did she actually live? Alan shook his head. Nobody knew. Then one night, my dad followed her. He watched her climb to the 2nd floor. Then, she kept going. Emma felt something cold move across her back. What do you mean? There was another staircase. Alan pointed towards the ceiling. Where the attic stairs are now. Emma whispered. A 3rd floor? Alan nodded. My dad said there was a corridor. 4 doors. Numbers 9, 10, 11 and 12. Emma looked towards the hallway. What happened? He came downstairs. Called the police. They went up. There was nothing there. Just the attic. Emma swallowed. And Sarah disappeared. 2 weeks later, a smell started coming through the ceiling. They searched the attic. Found her body. Emma stared at him. How did she die? Alan looked down. That's the strange part. She'd been dead for nearly 60 years. Emma said nothing. Alan continued. The clothes, the dental work, everything. They eventually identified her from records. Sarah Wells, born 1892, disappeared 1914. From this building, Alan nodded. The building used to have 3 floors. What happened to it? Fire. 1914, the top floor burned. 4 people died. Afterwards, they removed what remained and built the roof over the 2nd floor. Emma looked at the letter. Then who sent this? Alan didn't answer. Emma returned to her flat. She decided she was leaving. That afternoon, she called the letting agent. She packed 2 suitcases. At 6:30, her sister agreed to collect her. At 5:47, Emma heard someone climbing the stairs. She assumed it was her sister arriving early. Then the footsteps passed her floor and continued upwards. Step, step, step. Emma opened her door. The landing was empty. But at the far end, where there should have been a wall, there was a staircase. Going up. Emma couldn't move. Warm yellow light came from above. Someone was humming. A woman. Emma should have closed the door. She should have gone downstairs. Instead, she climbed. At the top was a corridor. Old wallpaper. Gas lamps, 4 doors. 10, 11, 12. The door to 12 stood open. Emma approached. Inside, a young woman sat beside a fireplace. She wore a long skirt, white blouse, and her dark hair was pinned behind her head. On the table were dozens of envelopes. The woman looked up. Emma. Emma froze. How do you know my name? The woman smiled. Your post keeps coming to my flat. Emma stepped backwards. The woman's smile disappeared. Don't go. Behind Emma, the staircase was gone. There was only a wall. Emma began pounding against it. Hell! The corridor lights flickered. Doors 9, 10, and 11 slowly opened. People stood inside. Burned, blackened, silent. Sarah stood behind Emma. They've been waiting for someone, she whispered, who still has somewhere to go back to. Emma screamed. Downstairs, Alan heard it. He ran onto the landing and saw Emma's flat door standing open. Her suitcases were inside. Her coat, her phone, everything. But Emma was gone. Police searched the building, the attic, the roof, every flat. Nothing. Emma was officially declared missing 3 years later. Alan moved away soon afterwards. The building was renovated in 2024. During the work, builders removed part of the attic floor. Underneath, they discovered something impossible. A staircase. It descended. Instead of going up, at the bottom was a section of burned corridors sealed between the walls. 4 doors. 9, 10, 11, 12. Inside number 12, they found 5 bodies. 4 were over a century old. The 5th was Emma. Except, according to the pathologist, Emma had been dead for 97 years, and inside her coat pocket, they found an unopened letter addressed to IT next Tinanti Flighty Twive Sheikh ID Fefalo or RT 14 Keldar Stiaries, and nobody opened it. The building was demolished, but sometimes people walking along Calder Street late at night notice something strange. Between numbers 12 and 16, there is occasionally another building, a narrow Victorian building 3 stories high, and in the highest window, a young woman stands watching the street, waiting for someone to bring her post.
1894, Hennings Hedadazi Thomas Avery took the position because nobody else wanted it. That should have warned him. The job itself seemed simple enough. Night watchman at Hesty Jude's receiving house, on the outskirts of York. The building stood behind the old cemetery, separated from the graves by a high stone wall. It wasn't quite a mortuary. Not officially. Bodies were brought there when doctors were uncertain whether death had truly occurred. Such places were not uncommon. People feared premature burial, and so the dead were sometimes kept for a day or 2 before being placed in the ground. St. Jude's had 6 rooms. 5 contained ordinary wooden tables. The 6th contained a bell. Thomas noticed it on his first evening. A thin rope disappeared through a hole in the ceiling then travelled down the wall and into the room below. What does that do? The caretaker, Mr. Grady, looked at the rope. Nothing anymore. Thomas smiled. Then why is it there? Grady pulled on his coat. Old precaution. He pointed towards the basement door. Each body downstairs had a cord, tied around one wrist. If somebody woke it, they pulled it. Thomas understood. The bell rang. Grady nodded. Exactly. Thomas looked at the basement door. Did it ever happen? Grady stopped. His hand remained on the front door handle. No, then he left. Thomas's first night was uneventful. At midnight, he walked through the building. Nothing. At 1, he drank tea. At 2, he read the newspaper. At 3:17, the bell rang. Ding. Thomas looked up. Silence. He waited. Nothing. Then, ding. A second ring. Thomas stood. The rope beside the wall was moving. Slowly. Up, then down. Ding. Thomas approached. He touched the rope. It stopped. He remembered what Grady had said. Each body downstairs had a cord tied around one wrist. Thomas stared at the basement door. There was only one problem. The basement was empty. Grady had shown him before leaving. No bodies had arrived that day. Thomas opened the basement door. Hello. The stone steps descended into darkness. He took his lantern. The air below was considerably colder. At the bottom were 6 narrow chambers. Each contained a wooden table, all empty. Thomas walked between them. The bell ropes hung from the ceiling. 5 were still. The 6th was swinging. Thomas raised his lantern. The rope disappeared beneath the table. He crouched. Nothing then. From behind him someone whispered, "Too late." Thomas spun around. Empty room. He ran upstairs. The bell did not ring again. The following morning, Thomas confronted Grady. It rang. Grady stopped unlocking the office. What? The bell. Grady looked towards the rope. What time? 3:17. Grady's face changed. Exactly. Near enough. Exactly. Thomas? Thought. Yes. 3:17. Grady closed his eyes, then whispered, "Damn." Thomas became angry. You know something? Grady walked into the office. From a locked drawer, he removed an old ledger. He placed it on the table. March 1866. Thomas read. Names, dates, causes of death. Then, one entry. Elias Vane, age 38. Cause unknown. Thomas looked up. Who was he? Schoolmaster? Grady sat down. They found him unconscious beside the river. No pulse. No breathing. The doctor pronounced him dead. He was brought here. Thomas already knew what was coming. He wasn't dead. Grady shook his head. At 3:17, the bell rang. Thomas stared at him. Why didn't anyone help him? The watchman was asleep. Grady's voice became quieter. When he finally came downstairs, Vane was dead. For real this time. Thomas swallowed. How? Grady looked at his own hands. It pulled the rope so hard. It cut through his wrist. His fingernails were broken. The door was covered in scratches. Thomas looked towards the basement. Why does the bell still ring? It doesn't. It did last night. Grady leaned closer. Then don't answer it again. Thomas frowned. I didn't answer it. Did you go downstairs? Wes. Grady stared at him. Then you answered. Thomas almost resigned. Almost, but work was difficult to find, and St. Jude's paid well, so against his better judgment he returned that evening. At 3, Thomas sat beside the fireplace. He watched the clock. 3:10, 3:12, 3:15, 3:16. Thomas stared at the bell. The minute hand moved. 3:17, nothing. Thomas exhaled. Then someone knocked on from beneath the floor. 3 times. Knock, knock. Thomas remained seated. A voice followed, muffled beneath the boards. Watchman. Thomas gripped the chair. Watchman? Please. He said nothing. The bell rang. Ding. Please. I'm awake. Thomas closed his eyes. The voice sounded human, terrified. Ding. Please help me. Thomas stood, then stopped. Don't answer. The voice began crying. I don't want to die down here. The Thomas whispered. It's not real. The crying stopped. Silence. Then the voice said, Thomas. His blood ran cold. How do you know my name? The moment the words left his mouth, Thomas realized his mistake. He had answered. The bell began ringing violently. Ding, 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 ding. The basement door flew open. A freezing wind rushed up the stairs. Every lamp in the building went out. Thomas grabbed his lantern. The flame had turned a sickly blue. Footsteps came from below, bare feet against stone, slowly climbing. Thomas backed towards the entrance. One step, then another, then another. A hand appeared around the basement doorway. Pale fingers, broken nails, bloodless skin. A man crawled onto the landing. His clothes were filthy. His wrist was almost severed, but his face was worse. His mouth had been sewn shut. Thomas screamed. The thing looked at him, then raised one finger towards its lips, quiet. Behind it, another bell rang. Not upstairs, down in the basement. Then another, and another. 5 bells ringing together. Thomas looked towards the stairs. Figures were climbing out of the darkness. Men, women, a child, all wearing burial clothes, all with their mouths sewn closed. Thomas ran. He reached the front door. Locked. He turned the key. Nothing. Behind him, the bells stopped. Thomas slowly turned. Elias Vane stood in the center of the room. The stitches across his mouth began to stretch. One snapped, then another, then another. His mouth opened. Why? He whispered. Did nobody come? Thomas backed against the door. I wasn't here. Elias stepped closer. Someone always says that. Thomas looked at the bell rope. An idea came to him. He grabbed it and pulled. Ding! The dead stopped. Thomas pulled again. Ding! Elias stared at him. Thomas shouted, I'm here now. Then he pulled one final time. Ding! The front door opened behind him. Thomas fell backwards into the snow. When he looked up, St. Jude's was dark. No figures, no bells, nothing. Thomas never returned. St. Jude's receiving house closed in 1902. It remained abandoned until demolition in 1931. Workers clearing the basement found 6 coffins beneath the floor. Nobody knew they were there. 5 contained human remains. The 6th was empty. Inside its lid, deep scratches formed 4 words. Nobody heard the bell. Twice the remains were reburied in the cemetery. The old bell was given to a local church, and for almost 70 years nothing unusual happened. Then, in 2001, the church was converted into private flats. A young couple moved into the apartment beneath the old bell tower. On their 3rd night, the husband woke at 3:17. The bell above them was ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. His wife remained asleep. He went upstairs to investigate. The bell rope was moving by itself. He reached for it. Then someone knocked from inside the wall. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. A frightened man's voice whispered. Watchman. The husband stepped closer, and because nobody had ever told him what Thomas Avery had learned more than a century earlier, he answered, Yes. The knocking stopped. Then, from somewhere